You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Hey, welcome back, world. We are here once more, Upstream with Cashill and Edge. Jack Cashill here.
Loy Edge here.
And we are going upstream to the source of the culture. Actually, we're time traveling here today with Sherman and...
Sherman, what are you doing?
and
You
Mr.
love
Peabody.
that, don't you?
That was a really pretty inspired bunch of vignettes they had on that show.
That show kicked ass.
With Rocky.
Boris Badenoff and Tasha Fatal.
Right, and...
Mr. Big.
And what's his name? Dudley Do-Right of the Canadian Mounted Police.
Now, I love my horse.
And Rocky and
Dudley, stay away from my daughter.
And in fact, Rocky and Bullwinkle were the least entertaining characters in the show, of which they were the title characters.
That's right. That's right. I did not care that much for Rocket J. Squirrel or Bullwinkle.
No.
But the other characters were great.
It's often the,
had to struggle through some of the Aesop's fables and things. That was a little highbrow for me at age 7. But I did like, the double entendre in cartoons is so important. You've got to have something that a 50-year-old dad can watch with his 12-year-old son.
Without any sense that the 12-year-old will get it.
Right. And you're both laughing. I mean, this is why Warner Brothers cartoons were so great.
They were, for that reason.
And why Disney cartoons sucked.
Now.
Always did.
Yeah, right. They never, now they don't even double entendre anymore. Now it's just all selling gay stuff all the time or trans stuff.
Well, there's Satanist stuff. Here's a little game you can all play at home. There's a Disney Channel, I think.
Yeah.
Play this game. It could be a drinking game. It could be just a little bet on housework. Flip it on, and I will bet you on the screen at the moment you flip it on, a character will have either horns or very horn-like, pert, triangular ears that stick up like horns.
Yeah.
I'm not just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Turn it on and tell me if I'm right.
Well, next time I visit my granddaughters, I will do that because they watch the Disney Channel. But I will say that my 10-year-old and I will spend, she's a big fan of Ben Shapiro. And we watch the Ben Shapiro show and she'll say to me, say, Granddad, let's go watch the Ben Shapiro show,
Does she think he's cute?
She likes when he makes fun of like the TikTok ladies,
Really?
The libs of TikTok, right?
Uh-huh.
Where they have all these like crazy, and what Shapiro does,
I haven't seen his show.
He does these little vignettes where he makes fun of these people,
I've heard him several times.
And they're well
radio.
produced and they're kind of fun, but they certainly appeal to my granddaughter, we also watch Cops together on Fox Nation, so
everybody should watch Cops.
She's being well raised. Brought to you by the men and women of law enforcement. Now, we were talking last show about the year 1972, and we thought, well, maybe we'll visit other years in the future. But then we realized we had barely scratched the surface on 1972. Now, for many of our audience, 1972 is something that would be in your history books if history books told history accurately. Some of you in the audience will remember it. Some well, some not so well. But we thought we'd throw some more highlights.
I made some notes after show because I thought, well, God, we didn't get to anything. It was so much. Clarence Kelly, this is a local thing.
Local gun national because he was the Kansas City police
local.
Chief.
Yeah, right. He was the Kansas City police chief. And then he went in 72, he took the place of Hoover.
Right. There was an interim guy, Patrick Gray, who got involved with Nixon and stuff, but he didn't last long.
Yeah, I don't know how that all worked out, what the machinations were on that, but I do know that it was important for Hoover to make a hasty exit if they were going to do all the stuff they wanted to do, because as you say,
he didn't want any
part of any of it.
Right. What's interesting, too, is that there's a very good book about Hoover out now, bio called G-Man by Beverly Gage. It's kind of a straightforward, it's not a political book, but Gage, you could tell, leans a little left. And yet Hoover keeps coming out better than his contemporaries. Certainly the presidents who, were his nominal boss. And the thing that she does make a point of, and this is one of those smears that has outlasted its usefulness, is the cross-dressing stuff. She said, no way, no how, He was as antiseptic as Trump. The idea that he would no more likely to wear a dress out in public than Trump would be to have Russian prostitutes pee on him. It just wasn't happening, and it didn't happen.
But there were probably some vested interests at work in destroying his reputation.
Oh, sure. A lot of people, yeah.
In the rearview mirror.
Right, right. And he did have a unusual social life.
Yeah.
And that is that,
what do you mean?
well,
you mean like he wasn't married? And
he was a guy, for instance, when he was in his mid-60s, balding, no women in his world, not married, no children, hung out with another guy all the time,
This is sad.
That was pathetic.
Who could live like that?
Well, see, but there are no rumors, at least as far as I know, that you
women,
wear,
it's all your fault.
that you wear dresses, So.
I leotard is what I wear.
Okay, pedal pushers.
If you had legs like this, you'd wear leotard, I'll tell you. It's hot. We didn't talk about Eagleton.
That was
72.
Yes, it was, and it was both local and national.
We didn't talk about any of that madness. That was the Democrat convention that year when everything changed. That was the year that they went all in with the gay rights.
They went woke in 72.
72.
Right.
You want to find out when this stuff really hit its stride.
Right.
72.
And that's why George McGovern, the nominee, won one state. But he picked as his running mate Senator Tom Eagleton from our home state here in Missouri.
That's right.
And then when they found out that that Eagleton had gotten shock treatment for depression, McGovern comes out, and this did not help his campaign.
Well, McGovern said he supported him 1,000%.
Right. That's where that 1,000% line comes in.
That's right.
And that lasted for about 3 days until someone said to him, "No, you got to dump him."
How is it today? 483.
The
92.
Right, the Standard and Poor. Someone is shorting the market on Eagleton's future.
That was a disaster, though.
Oh, and you remember whom they replaced him with?
I'm trying to think.
By the way, notice how I used whom there instead of who?
Yeah.
But I should have said, you remember with whom they replaced him, yeah.
Or, no, yeah. With whom he was replaced. He was replaced with... No, I don't remember right now.
Speaking of Kennedy cabals, Sergeant Shriver.
Oh, that's right, Sergeant Shriver. What a magnetic personality.
He started the Peace Corps. He was the head of the Peace Corps, and
CIA too.
There it was. So
that was I believe he had some dalliances in other organizations.
Yeah, he was pretty well wired into that, but not enough wiring to get him over the finish line in November. They won one state, and that state was...
I'm sorry, but you cannot steal 49 states. That would be they could now.
The only state they didn't carry was Massachusetts. Because in Massachusetts, they vote for whomever Kennedy tells them to vote for. The Kennedy dynasty did, and
that's right. I'll bet Schreiber got them. Saved a little face for him.
They probably did.
He got him on the board.
That's right. He got the Kennedys behind that ticket.
They could have been skunked.
Right. They could have been. They could have been 50-0. In fact, in 1984, Reagan won 49 states also. The reason he didn't win all 50, not the District of Columbia, of course, which is a home of cronies and all kinds of various scumbaggery, but the reason he didn't win 50 is because he didn't want to embarrass Mondale in his home state of Minnesota, Walter Mondale, so they pulled all their ads. They knew they were going to win. I mean, that was a kind of foregone conclusion, but they pulled the ad so that Mondale could have at least the quiet honor of winning his home state, right?
That's That's really a wonderful story.
Well, it speaks to the heart of Ronald Reagan,
It really does.
great American president. Now,
And he also, when Reagan came out the night before and accused Harmon Killebrew of being, no way, he didn't do that.
Harmon Killebrew was famous Minnesota baseball player, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Are we moving on?
Yeah, we are. Another.
We got Bill Ayers was in the news in '72.
Yeah.
You're familiar with William Ayers.
I've
Quite
heard about
familiar,
him. Yeah,
are you not?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Yeah.
You've written you wrote a great book. In fact, here in the United States of America this year, many people believe that Barack Hussein Obama did not author his autobiography. In fact, it's been confirmed by several people that it was this gentleman, William Ayers, who wrote it.
Who had a major hand in its writing. He was the muse for Barack Obama.
And the guy behind that, Jack Cashill.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's true, but I'll have people come up to me and say, did you know that Bill Ayers helped Barack Obama write his
Right.
book? I said, no, I know something about that. Having unearthed that fact in 2008. I think we've talked about this on
You
the
don't
show.
give him a noogie. You go, I wrote that book, you knucklehead. Now get out of here.
I think we've talked about it, but probably only in brief. What it's like a month before an election to have discovered the October
nougat.
surprise,
Yeah.
right?
You found the October surprise.
And then I also found out the way the media worked too, just as they did in 2020, to make sure October surprises are killed in the womb, as it did with Hunter Biden's story. But it's
The baffle.
it was an interesting period of 4 weeks. But yeah, Bill Ayers, for those who don't know, is the one of the leaders of the group called the Weather Underground, which was formed when the SDS broke up, Students for Democratic Society, and it was the radical wing. First it was the Weather faction, then they had to go underground because they were bombing stuff, right?
And see, 72 and the parallel with all these radical terrorist white supremacists that we have today. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. You're right, because Bill Ayers was real.
Yeah, he was real. Actually blew up the Capitol as well. They planted a bomb in a bathroom.
And then in
the Capitol.
72,
Right.
they hit the Pentagon.
Right, but what they did not do was take a pen from Nancy Pelosi's desk.
That's right.
They did not use flagpoles as weapons.
That's right. And
They-
Bill Ayers was interviewed, 20 years ago, and said he was unrepentant, said
Yeah.
he would do it again,
Right.
would do more of
Do
it.
more. We didn't do enough.
And that's why the one guy said, I would have taken a pen and pencil set. Next time I go, I would do that.
I would do that. Yeah, someone took a baseball from Nancy Pelosi's office, and that's probably worth 20 years in prison. The gods of justice caught up with Bill Ayers in 2001. He has a book come out called Fugitive Days. Right?
Oh, yeah, this is funny.
He gets a great review in the morning New York Times. It's out there. You can imagine for a couple hours, and there he is saying, "I didn't do
His black
enough."
evil heart was filled with joy.
There he is standing on the American flag, right?
Yeah.
And the New York Times this is a bestseller. It's about to happen. It's the launch day, but it is September 11th, 2001. So when you're a terrorist bomber at 6 a.m. that day, that's not too bad, But at 8:49, your world is over. You have as much future as the World Trade Center, Your whole future is collapsing right in front of you. Then I redeemed him. I revived him potentially, of course, by discovering his authorship. But his world did not want to know that,
He was proud of it.
Yeah.
He bragged about
He
it.
did brag about it.
Admitted it. I mean, you nailed it.
Yeah.
And you legitimately nailed what should have been an October surprise.
Yeah.
It should have changed the course of the election.
Right. I mean, David Remnick, an Obama biographer, editor in New Yorker, said as much. He said this was a charge that if it was true or believed to be true by enough people, would have meant the end of the candidacy. Because it would have meant, two things. One is that Obama was not the literary genius that everyone thought he was, that elevated him to that status that he had. But secondly, it would have made a total lie out of his notion that Bill Ayers was just some guy in the neighborhood.
Yeah, some guy in the neighborhood.
They were intimate friends. They had dinner together once a week for years right up until the time Obama was elected to the senator. And when they were meeting back then in the lefty Chicago circles, Ayers was the big dog. His wife, Bernadine Dorn, was like the ultimate hottie of the revolutionary movement. Back then,
the
Natasha.
Natasha Fatal.
And there's a loss there because now revolutionary women,
Yeah, they're not looking as good.
they have pink
hair. A lot of them go with the
they're
pink and the
50
purple.
pounds overweight. They wear dress badly, and they don't shave their underarms.
We shouldn't talk about our audience that way. I'm just kidding. No.
But there was Bernadine Dorn back in the day with her, folk singer hair and her leather miniskirts. Women were women then, Now they're, like basically duffel bags with long hair.
Oh, my gosh. Folks, that was just humor. He didn't mean
I'm sorry. My office in Westport, this is what I see in Westport. There are parts of the world where
there
that's
are a
not
lot
true.
of duffel bags with
Right.
pink hair, but they're pierced.
Yeah. So anyhow, where were we?
We're talking about 72.
Yeah.
We talked about Watergate, and we did talk about Munich.
We did not talk about Munich last
That was a
time.
big deal.
That was a major deal.
Munich Olympics took a set. Now, looking at that, you see the same power structure that's always slipping around, moving the Hegelian dialectic, and you got these players like the UN and the Israel, the
Right.
Palestinians, and I mean, what was that deal all about in the end?
That's crazy. I mean, for those who may not remember, this is during the Munich Olympics in 1972. This was the Israeli wrestling team were taken hostage by, I guess it was the PLO or some Palestinian
I think it was
organization.
Palestinian, yeah.
It was Palestinian. And and then everything broke down. I mean, it was the what do you call it? The negotiations broke down. They took them to the airport. They were trying to get them out of there.
Entebbe.
Yeah, no, that was Entebbe was something else. But
Was that?
that was a successful one, a successful raid by the Israeli commandos to rescue a plane full of Israelis.
Right.
In this case, the Israeli commandos were kept out of it. This was done by the German police,
Huh.
who don't have a historically good
No, they should
reputation.
have called in the Jews on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right. You want to rescue some hostages? Call the Jews. It's like no, because they know how to do that sort of thing. And it was a disaster. Many of them, virtually all the Israeli wrestlers were killed, and a lot of the hostages were killed, and it was just a mess. Then they faced the challenge of what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we continue?
They're not used to really thinking on their feet like that.
No.
That kind of stuff.
And so you remember what they did?
No.
The show must go on. They continued the Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Didn't we get our butts kicked by the Russians?
Oh, that was a terrible day. I remember it well because I was watching that game.
Right down to the last point.
In my case, it was a little more bizarre because, I played basketball as a kid. I followed basketball closely.
I didn't know that.
Up until
Cashill and basketball. Never thought of that.
well, Kareem Abdul-Cashill. That was the name I used to use when I played. Actually,
I thought it was Cassius Cashill.
my high school team played the 4 years I was there. We played Abdul-Jabbar every year, and we were in the same league, in a manner of speaking. But in '72, up to that point, the Americans had never lost an Olympic basketball game.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
They won every year, and then they played the Russians in the finals that year. And the Russians were getting better and better because they had national
This is
teams.
so much like the hockey thing.
Yeah, these guys are 30
It's
years
just
old.
crazy. I
They've
mean,
been-
we should have never won that hockey game.
right.
They should have never won that basketball
The
game.
miracle. But we didn't cheat to win the basketball
Okay,
hockey game.
continue then with the cheating.
So
story.
here it is. I'm watching the game. I remember this well. The United States is down 1 point. There's 2 seconds left. Doug Collins, who goes on to become a pro and a coach, gets fouled. He goes to the free throw line for either 1-1 or 2 shots, right? I'm watching and say, come on, Doug. I have confidence in Doug Collins. My power goes out of my house, right? I'm living in an apartment building.
Really?
Yeah.
Right at that moment?
Right at that moment. So I go banging on doors saying, anyone have a TV? Let me in. I have to watch the end of this game, right? And I couldn't get in. And then when I finally found out the results, the United States had lost. I said, how did they lose? Because Collins made the free throws.
Yeah.
And then the Russians threw the ball in bounds, and then it went awry, and they said, oh, the clock hadn't started. They took them 3 efforts to get the ball in bounds, and they scored in the last second and won. Right?
Oh, wow.
It was a major bummer, but it was also indicative of the state of the union at that time. We were losing confidence in ourselves as a nation. 72 was the last year we fought a battle in Vietnam.
That's right.
And, we lost an Olympic basketball game, These are then the Munich thing, which overshadowed the basketball loss. It was a period of beginning to get into some down. We were in the middle of gas was about ready to shoot through the roof, and recession was about ready
we
to
had
hit.
just abandoned the gold standard.
Yeah, that's right.
The year before that.
Right.
We had let it loose and gone full fiat.
And that introduced the 70s, which was a down decade.
That's right. Chaos. There was a lot, and these are the parallels I see on a political, economic, is that level of chaos. I think it's very similar to the stress and chaos and kind of, what's the word for down, depressed? Anyway, there's this morose sort of feeling to the news and everything that waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right. That's right.
72 was like that.
Yeah, you were always waiting for something worse to happen.
And nobody was planning big things. Like, I was in high school then. You weren't dreaming about big business opportunities. Kind of like now. You're going, I just got to keep my crap together and just cut some expenses and, make sure I have a gun.
Right.
Because we just gotten through with riots.
Right. In the late 60s, there were a whole series of riots, not unlike the ones that that followed George Floyd.
That's right.
Except those were more lethal because the cops shot back at that time. Mm-hmm. And store owners shot back. So that it was provided a certain counterforce to the rioters. And there were a lot of them. Many, just, including my city, Newark, which is as a centerpiece of my book, Untenable, the true story of white ethnic flight from America City's out in July. So make sure you get a copy. But 72 was the kickoff to the badness of that decade. You had Watergate, you had Munich, you had all these bad things happen. Then after Munich, though, the Israelis formed a team, and this is the subject of the movie Munich, to like a crack team to go around the world and take out the people responsible for the Munich terrorist attack. And the movie is it's really pretty well done. A little too much hand wringing for my taste. I like to see them just the Israelis go out and kill people, just if they have a just and righteous cause. But that was 72. So yeah, there's a circularity to events in life, and I was going to raise that about the question that we're seeing today, and this is something you have experience with. And what prompted me to raise this issue is that I was just reading a book called Oscar Wars by a guy named Michael Schulman. It's actually a very good book about the creation of the Oscar, the Academy Awards, and where it goes off the tracks, even though his reporting is accurate to a point. And this is what we're reporting misses the boat, is that it's what you omit, right? He's talking about the Hollywood blacklist of the late 40s and in the 1950s. And he suppresses one notion, that is that the Hollywood 10, the people at the center of this controversy, these are screenwriters, were card-carrying members of the Communist Party USA. And in 1947, when they were called before the House Un-American Activities Committee, what their followers did not know this. They just thought they were innocent progressives, who belonged to some front organizations and were now being punished.
Because white males, everybody knows, hate creativity and arts.
That's right.
And humor.
And Republicans were now in control of Congress, and they were trying to. And when you read, and then I went back at lunchtime today and just watched a bunch of YouTube documentaries on the Hollywood 10. Every one of them had the same tone, right? This was a dreadful period in American life. Can you imagine? We were denying people the right to make the movies of their choice, to have creative access to Hollywood. And
that sounds very similar to the books that the children are not allowed to read, these great books. Like, what's that thing in your hand?
Well, the one big Florida scandal, by the way, recently, it turned out there was these 4 books that were banned. And no, they were moved from the primary school library to the middle school library because they thought they were more appropriate. That's the kind of thing that
but that's
right,
the same vibe.
That tone. So, and I thought that would be kind of interesting to talk to you about this, because the very same people who are now, I mean, Schulman's book is, just out now. There's tons of information if you wanted to know about what the Hollywood 10 were really up to. What they're, when you took an oath to get your card to be a member of that party, you swore your allegiance to the most evil man in the history of the 20th century. That was Joseph Stalin. You were at their beck and call. You followed their party line, no matter how illogical it seemed or how.
Isn't that where the term party line came from?
Yeah, it does, right, literally. And they were.
Except for the telephone kind.
And in 1947, our friends in the Soviet Union were busy stealing atomic bomb secrets, because they didn't have one for 4 years that we had one. They finally came up with one in 1949, but for 4 years, that was the source of our true hegemony. And then, so this goes on into the 1950s. Now we're fighting a proxy war against the people you've sworn your allegiance to in Korea. None of this comes up. So, and yet there's still, bemoaning the blacklist and celebrating these clowns who bravely resisted. And yet today in Hollywood, what's going on? Well, you were there.
There was, I really think when I was there, I was there 2000 to 2011. It was more, the change was coming from the people getting fed up.
Yeah.
The actors and writers and directors and producers. It's just like the left had done about all they could do. They had wrung it out like a wash rag.
Yeah.
And people had been forced to keep quiet for so long that they started a little organization. There probably were several of them, but the one I was familiar with was a group of actors that got together and started their own parallel world where they would, they're just now producing more conservative, if you want to call it that, non-leftist material.
Right.
But to exchange opportunities, to have drinks and to have meals and socialize and, hopefully give each other work. Pretty soon there were like 3,500 people in this group.
Now, how subterranean was it? How?
It was subterranean enough to have spooks infiltrating it.
Yeah.
Couldn't talk about it. There's a rule. You didn't talk about Fight Club. And you didn't say the name.
Right. That's
And you didn't mention the people who were very, very high profile who were in it.
Right.
And other than that, just have fun. And it was not a cynical group. It was education. It was people telling jokes and stories. Breitbart was always there.
Yeah.
And, to give you an idea of the level of intellect and the level of entertainment quality, Breitbart was one of the 10 or 12 people who always had something to say at this
Sure.
deal.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
the rest of them were all professional entertainers.
Right.
It wasn't some dry AA meeting.
Now, did you involve were the technical level of people like Grips and you
Yes.
know, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, cast, as they're called, crew, as they're
right,
called,
right.
they're majority not leftists.
Right. This is my experience also.
It's kind of like the skilled trades and the unions.
Yeah.
They might give lip service
Right.
to Democrat, but when they walk out of the room, they're not thinking, "Oh, gee, I can't wait to vote for Hillary" or
No,
whatever.
because they're mostly males. They're mostly technical.
Right.
Yeah, they can do things. You know, they're not dependent. But at the same time, in Hollywood, which hates blacklisting, there was a blacklist against people like them who, if they were too public in their views, and if they didn't have the clout to override it. So if you're Clint Eastwood, you could get away with, you know, you're at a certain level.
You really had to be in some pretty rarefied air to get away
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
Clint, Eastwood. That level. Tom Selleck, maybe to a certain extent.
Right.
They'd already had to have pretty good success before it was revealed that they
Right.
were.
But I suspect if you're a mid-level guy or a crew or a tech,
You ain't
know,
working usually.
Yeah. And if it gets out that in the era of Google, I found this in my own case. I used to be able to mix in mainstream media, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was on Kansas City Week in Review, and I was producing documentaries for the
Well,
local.
you're articulate and you're subdued. You're like having William Buckley on the show, but only not a CIA.
As far as you know, right?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Of course I'm targeted.
All right. That's why I joined the Latin mass community so I can infiltrate it. You know that. Don't give me away. No, but what I noticed is that in the era of Google,
Yeah.
once they could Google me,
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time I heard that phrase. I was going to be on a radio show, and the guy was telling me all about myself. I said, "How'd you know that?" He goes, "Oh, I Googled you." I remember it was in Columbia, Missouri. I was going out to do a book signing or something.
And you checked your trousers real quick and said,
said,
I don't
yeah.
see anything.
Yeah, right. You Googled me. I haven't been Googled since my trip to San Francisco last year, and I swear I was drunk. I didn't know, you know.
Yeah, but they axed you?
Yeah. And then I realized that I could never win an award show again.
Yeah.
So, I write for a business magazine. I run a monthly column, straight business magazine. And they said, "Oh, Jack, you have great columns. Submit it to the annual thing." I said, "I can't win." They said, "Why?" "Because they'll Google me."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because my articles are restrained enough to work in a regional business magazine, but they Google you. Same thing with award shows for producing documentaries. Even if the documentary was benign, there was no hope that I was gonna win. In fact, I was gonna drag down the documentary by being associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
now there are new opportunities.
oh yeah, I mean you could find your way, and
But just recently,
yeah,
there was a dark period for 10 years
Yeah.
after Google
yeah,
came on. And like you said, it seemed pretty hopeless. If you weren't marching to the drumbeat of the mainstream leftist media, you were in pretty dire straits.
right. I was dropped from this talk show in Kansas City.
Which was never as good
No, I mean it was 'cause
after you were gone.
I was the only one there who knew how to do it,
It's true.
because the other guys were just like reciting facts, and I would always come with a few quips and and have fun. And I was the only contrary voice.
Yep.
And the host was a good guy too. It wasn't his fault. They went over his head. Was
that Masterman?
No. It was
Shannon?
no.
Nick?
Nick. Yeah.
Nick Haynes?
I want to get him bounced. He's still there.
I love him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I liked him a lot.
Did I ever tell you what I did to him?
No.
They had a fundraiser for the new transmitter or whatever. This
It was
is
a trans something. Right?
20.
They were ahead of their time. They were
That's
in the
right. They
trans.
were 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was working at KCR, and he would do the news.
Right.
I'm Nick Haynes, and I came on. I was pre-recording promos for the
Whatever.
the new transmitter.
Yeah.
And I was laying down one after another.
Right.
And in the mix, and they would just plug them in and play them. And in the mix, I said, "Hi, I'm Nick Haynes, and I hate my job."
Nick is from Wales, by the way, so that was a pretty good Welsh
They
accent.
played it. I think he wanted to kill me.
I would have if I were him. In Wales, they have, they've been drawing and quarter you. They have some really serious ways of killing
But I
people.
love him. He's the best thing that station's had.
Yeah, I know. He's a good guy. He's got a bunch of kids, and, he's a guy with good values. Mm-hmm. And you know what he did? He was the last politically neutral. I knew him well. I had him over my house. I still don't know his politics. I think I know, but
Right.
But he did a great job of keeping that under wraps because that was
He truly took the professional route on that.
Right.
You don't see very often.
he was a moderator, and what a moderator does, what a moderator should do, not like the CNN lady at the nasty CNN
Right.
at the Trump town hall,
Right.
Caitlin, whatever.
But I got you off track again.
No, and they've never asked me in the Google era. I've never been asked back to do a documentary. I produced a whole series of successful documentaries for them. They're basically they produced them to raise money as basically for the mission at this is a PBS station in Kansas City. So, in a sense, when you're blacklisted from one thing, you're forced. It's not terrible because you can still make a living. But you're forced basically to write and stay in your ghetto. So we have a conservative media ghetto. We have conservative, organizations that meet quietly. But it's very difficult, if not impossible now, to cross out of that into the mainstream, even if you wanted to make a mainstream project, a product. So it's here's an expression I just don't like to hear, but I would have said it except for the fact that I hate it, which is, it is what it is. It's one of those cliches.
Limbaugh used to say that all the time, and he kind of was digging everybody when he did it.
Right.
It is what it is, I guess.
Sounds like something Walter Cronkite would say. And what did he say? How did he sign off? And
that's the way it is.
Right. Is that
in
what he
my
said?
mind.
My mind.
No, and that's the way it is. It seems like it. I don't remember.
We'll take some calls.
All right, caller. Taking a
Caller
caller
number one.
on Cronkite.
That eugenicist idiot.
And you got a call here, right?
No. I don't want SEO maximization.
Okay. See, what on cue? Your phone responded on cue. You have a very well-trained phone. So, no, so now when you were in Hollywood and you were going to these meetings, did you have a sense of a belonging? Did it give you like a?
Oh yeah, a camaraderie, a joie de vivre.
Yeah.
It was heavy because there's nothing that tempers those relationships like being the hunted, being the prey, being the outcast, and there you are in your ghetto, and you're 20 miles beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And there you are in the Burbank restaurant having lunch with 70 other people bemoaning their status in life and laughing and drinking about it in the daytime. I mean, a whole bunch of people day drinking, like-minded.
Yeah. Doesn't get much better.
I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? It
Yeah.
was so exhilarating. And I can't remember the name of it. Some weird place like Mysterious Garden Restaurant or something, and we'd be in the banquet room, and then somebody'd get up and tell their story, and then you'd see these. A lot of it was people who are now big podcast people.
Yeah.
Who were nobodies then.
It's like who? Like Adam Carolla or?
No, now I'm getting into naming names.
Yeah. Okay. Shouldn't do that. Yeah.
But you know.
Can you name some names? Were you,
Dalton Trumbo? I love that name. Dalton
Are you-
Trumbo?
or were you ever a member of Friends of Abe?
Oh, you said it. There, you said it.
I'm going to take a Fifth Amendment on that. I do not have to testify against myself. Can you please tell us some other names that were members of this organization? So who was the Abe in question?
Abe was Abe Lincoln.
Okay. That's not bad. Yeah.
So what they did was a couple of these big guys were talking about starting up this group, and they didn't know what to call it, and they were in Hollywood places having Hollywood meetings and
Right.
didn't want to be caught talking about anything conservative. So they said it was their agent, Abe, that they were talking about.
Yeah, okay. That works because there's probably a few agents in Hollywood named Abe.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, in West Hollywood, the Friends of Dorothy were holding separate meetings.
Friends of Dorothy, yeah. It's funny, a lot of people don't really know what that. Now, again, I'm not real sure the connection of how that Dorothy got associated with that on that Wizard of Oz.
Well, it was because Judy Garland,
Yeah.
who played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, was much beloved in the gay community.
Right. People, transvestites played her often.
Yeah, that's right.
She was a favorite, if not the favorite.
Right, which leads to one of the oddly climactic multimedia political moments in American history is when Judy Garland dies in 1969. And at the day of her funeral, the police, just coincidentally, because they thought they were raiding a mob joint, raided the Stonewall.
Stonewall. That
And-
was the same day? I
and
did
the,
not know that.
And because I wrote about this, so I remember the headlines from the Daily News the next day, and it was "Homo Nest Raided, Queen Bee Stinging Mad." Right? Can you imagine that headline today? They were
Oh, my God.
the transvestite entertainers were beside themselves in grief over Judy Garland's death that day. So when the police raided, they were stinging mad. They would not have it, and they rebelled, and thus became the landmark. It was like the Bunker Hill of the gay rights movement.
Wow, it was a tribute to Judy Garland.
To Judy
indirectly.
Garland, right? And thus the Friends of Dorothy came out of that.
I see.
And at the time, the gay movement was, you had to be somewhat underground. You couldn't. It was comparable in many ways to where
It kind
conservative
of went
was.
from not at all covert. I mean, I remember being a small child. Kansas City had a very large gay contingent.
Uh-huh.
And things like my grandmother, who had beauty salons, so that I was introduced to some very flamboyant hairdressers.
Right.
And she would take me everywhere, downtown in the plaza. We'd ride the bus, and she'd walk me through the plaza. Well, with Hallmark and with the fashions and all that, there was a lot of gay
Right.
presence. Well, all these gentlemen would stand at the Sidecar Lounge, which is what Pooch's was called at the Sidewalk Cafe.
Right.
Down at the end, there was a bar.
Uh-huh.
And so in the middle of the afternoon, all these guys would be out there drinking in their suits, looking like $1 million, dressed up to the nines, drinking martinis, standing outside, day drinking, chatting it up with each other, going crazy. And I'm walking by there, and I'm about 7, and I'm like, Grandma, what are all those men? Who are those men? What are they doing? And she said, well, honey, those are confirmed bachelors, and they're
Not unlike your future self, She anticipating
she wanted to be polite. Yep.
Well, they, I mean,
But they were all over the place, and everybody knew everybody who was gay, and they were designers. They were, very, very famous business people in town who were homosexual, and it was well known. And there didn't seem to be. Then it became kind of a quiet thing later. it might be my perception, but it seemed to me that in the 60s and early 70s, that thing became kind of hushed. And I think the 72 Democrat convention shows that because they suddenly made a big play on making it okay.
It went from being hushed to being political. Now, in Hollywood, it was always hushed because if you're Rock Hudson
Yeah.
and you're going to be a heartthrob,
That's a marketing decision.
yeah, that's total marketing. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So no actor who wanted to have a serious career as a big buff guy like a Tab Hunter or, and I was like, Tab Hunter and Troy Donahue were always being confused, and Troy Donahue would introduce himself. Hi, I'm the straight one. It's Tab Hunter didn't like that, but no. So there's always been undergrounds.
Yeah.
In Hollywood especially,
Oh, yeah.
but that the conservatives, that the people who would at one time have been able to, in the John Wayne era when there was a balance in Hollywood, when there was always a contingent of the John Waynes and Robert Taylors and Adolph Menju and Ginger Rogers and people on the right who were open, and they didn't hide it. And there was people on the left who were open, right? And there was a balance to the world. And then when they had to go, when they were blacklisted, and they were blacklisted by the studios, not by the government, they made heroes out of themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when conservatives are blacklisted, we're not at the point we're making heroes out of ourselves. We want that blacklist lifted. We're willing to tell you publicly what we believe in, what organizations we believe in, what our principles are, what our values are. We're not hiding it. We're not making believe we're something we're not. And that's the utter dishonesty of the original Hollywood blacklist. These guys never stopped lying to the public about who they were, even to their fans. So you had people like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall going to Washington to support the Hollywood 10, not knowing they were communists. The final word on this goes to the Coen brothers in their movie Hail Caesar, which is actually a funny movie, and they make fun of the Hollywood 10. And that's the ultimate, when you go from tragedy to farce, you know that your time in the center spotlight is kind of over, as being basking in your victimhood. But I don't know. I don't think we'll ever solve that. But if we are going to solve it, it's going to be right here on this show.
That's right, because we solve everything.
Every week.
From Real Media.
Wrap it up here at Real Media in Overland Park. We're Upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Upstream with Cashill and Edge.
And think what great world problems we can solve next week right here.
On Real Media.
Tune in or turn out.
WND. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.